mic working?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Bryan. I go to Nimmo United Methodist Church. I am a senior. And I titled my testimony, "In the Darkness Comes the Light of God's Love." I grew up in actually what was a surprisingly religious family considering my family's background. I was baptized Roman Catholic. For the first 8 years of my life, I went to church every Sunday, Sunday school, all of it. It was great. I felt a great connection with God, my early childhood. It was amazing. I mean, I had a great childhood. I had two parents that loved me very much. I never needed for anything. And then things changed. When I was 8 years old, my dad was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. And he had to undergo radioactive treatment to effectively dissolve his thyroid. And from that point on, he had to take medication every day that would act as the thyroid. And if he didn't take it, some of the side effects were substantial weight gain, and a lot of psychological problems. He changed after that, my dad. He used to be a really loving guy. I used to be able to go to him with anything and everything. Because of our financial situation, we weren't always able to afford the medication that he needed. And when he didn't have it, things were bad. He started getting violent, abusive. And this all started when I was 8 years old. Throughout my middle school and early high school life, I would always act as the protector of my family. When he got out of line, I put him back in his place. There were several times when I actually got into fistfights with him. These episodes were pretty periodic. There were times when he was feeling up, and there were times when it was really dark for all of us. And then one night, when I was in 9th grade, this was about 3 years ago, March 19th, 2012, he came home furious with nothing, just furious. He started beating on my mom, so naturally I came to her side and protected her. And during all of that, there was a point where he got his hands around my throat and tried to strangle me. And the only way I could get him off of me was to take a pocket knife and slice his arm. The police were called. was taken away in an ambulance for stitches. And immediately after that, we received a protective order that effectively took him out of our lives. That night was the darkest moment of my life. My life and the life of my family, they were truly in danger. And that's something that no kid should ever have to go through. For the next year and a half after that, I would continually struggle with a lot of psychological issues, like flashbacks, night terrors. There were times when I would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, because every time I fell asleep, I was transported back to that night. And I was forced to relive it over and over again, with no escape. I drifted away from God. I blamed him for what happened to me and my family. And I started down a really dark path. I started to doubt that he cared. And then I started to doubt that he was even there. I spent a year of my life without knowing God, when my childhood was centered around him. About a year and a half after that night, I was staying at a friend's house. And the next morning they were going to church. I decided, you know, what the heck, I'll go. And what happened at that service changed my life forever. Because when we got there, we sat down, we were in the front row of the chapel. This was a Baptist church, so it was fairly small. And the pastor started giving his sermon. And the sermon was about the parable of the lost sheep, if any of you know that. And if you'd like, I'd like to read it to you. It's Luke 15, verses 3 through 7. Then Jesus told them this parable. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep." I tell you that in the same way there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who do not need to. And that sermon, it felt so unreal because it felt like the pastor was speaking directly to me. I was that lost sheep. I was the sheep that wandered off the path. And I felt like in that moment, Jesus brought me back to the flock through that pastor. Now, of course, I didn't become a born-again Christian right after that. It still took some time. I was still struggling with a lot of anger towards God, a lot of anger towards the world. But slowly, I started to grow closer. At first, it was just silent prayers to myself in my room, hoping that God would listen. And then I started attending a youth group at Courthouse Community United Methodist. And that was kind of my gateway. After that, I started dating my best friend. This girl right here. She brought me to church. She asked me to come to one service with her. It was the Easter service of this past year. And I went. And I felt so at peace with who I was and what I'd been through. And I felt like God truly wanted me there. So I went on a mission trip this past summer with United Methodist. And that was when I first told my story. And in that moment, I had never felt closer to people than I did. And ever since then, I go to church every Sunday. I'm involved with the youth group. I'm involved with the youth choir. And now I'm happy to say that I love God above all else. And I'm so happy to be here speaking to you all. Because if my story helps at least one person in this room, then I feel like I've done what God was calling me to do.